Good morning, all. It's wonderful to see so many faces here. A lot of new faces for me, which is wonderful, and so many faces, old and new, out in our remote Sangha, our virtual Sangha. So, good morning. I've been enjoying the transition to fall weather. I was doing the math earlier that we are actually in fall now. Warm days, cool nights. During much of the summer, I was going out in the morning to walk the dogs, but after about 11 o'clock, I would stay inside to avoid the midday heat. And during the worst of it, I'm sure you all remember this if you live in New York, but during the worst of it, it was still in the 80s at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. But now in the late afternoon, it's really quite pleasant outside. I encourage you to go out and just stretch your legs. The light is soft, a little lower in the sky. The temperatures are down in the 70s, and then in the morning, sometimes we have temperatures in the 60s, which just perfect weather. And so now this little forest mouse can venture out of his burrow during the day as well. So I'm teaching a 5-week introduction to Zen at a yoga studio in Madison, New Jersey. It's a new challenge for me, actually, trying to figure out how to talk about this practice in all of its many facets to people who are completely new to it. And writing a Dharma talk for the Village Zendo is always challenging. But everybody here and virtually here has made the decision to come to a Zendo. And so you're already open to what this practice has to offer. People who come to a class at a yoga studio, a meditation class at a yoga studio, may just be trying to develop a little peace of mind, which I completely understand. And yet, I also want to share a bit of the flavor of Zen, some of the ritual, the teachings that have been developed over hundreds of years and passed down to us, because they can be so helpful in freeing us from the constraints of our conditioning. But I also want to do this without having everybody run for the door. So it's a challenge, and I've made a few mistakes already, and I'm sure I'll make a few more. I'm feeling my way. Of course, they came from meditation just as we all came from meditation, and zazen is the core of our practice. Zen is the meditation school of Buddhism. So part of it, maybe the main part of it, is just getting people comfortable with sitting. And sitting even for 10 minutes can be quite difficult if you've never done it before. It can be difficult for the body, finding a leg position that works for you, finding a comfortable posture, accepting that it's okay to sit in a chair instead of the way that everybody sits in the pictures, in a cross-legged position. I've been working with my posture for 20 years, so I know it's difficult. It's also difficult for the mind. Remember how in the early days of my practice, and sometimes still, my mind was all over the place. It was actually the very, very first days that I came to a Zendo. I was actually, in the very, very first days, it was the Zen Studies Society up on the Upper East Side. And just sitting in a darkened Zendo and breathing without fidgeting, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I mean, it was just so much tension built up just sitting in that darkened room. Sometimes I just wanted to jump off the cushion. And I personally believe our modern society has made it even more difficult to just sit down and be present. We all feel the tug of social media. How many times am I in a conversation and I feel myself reaching for my phone and it's like, no, you don't need to do that right now. I can actually just talk to the person I'm with. I don't need to look at my phone right now while I'm talking to someone. We often feel that tug because we sense some sort of emptiness. And so we want to distract ourselves instead of just sitting down in the midst of that emptiness and seeing what it's all about. So for today's talk, it's very interesting, but I was drawn to the same texts that Joan Sensei referred to in his talk maybe a week ago. Case 19, Ordinary Mind is the Way, from the Mumonkan. And the second one is the verse on the faith mind. So I'll talk about faith mind first. Various translations of the Japanese word. There's the verse on the faith mind, on believing in mind, the Faith in Mind Sutra, engraving trust in the heart. That's actually Kaz Tanahashi's translation, engraving trust in the heart. So the first couple of lines of this verse are, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. When love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Make the smallest distinction, however, and heaven and earth are set infinitely apart. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinions for or against anything. To set what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. When the deep meaning of things is not understood, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. The way is perfect, like vast space, where nothing is lacking and nothing is in excess." So the first line of this is, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." Really? In a presidential election year? You've got to be kidding. It makes it very difficult. So how do we understand the deep meaning of this text and reconcile it with what's going on in our minds and what's going on in the world around us? How do we do that? There's a line from a movie that I wrote down. "My heart breaks with all this hate. My heart breaks with all of this hate." It's just so much hate that we hear about. And we can't help but internalize some of that hate. So there are two sides in this election. And I do believe that the most passionate supporters on both sides truly believe that the future of our country is at stake. Both sides believe that. And of course, I have very, very strong beliefs, very, very strong preferences. I hate the scapegoating of immigrants. The threat of mass deportation makes me very, very angry. Many of these people have been here for years, are valued in their communities, and contribute to society. Why can't we just agree that we want a system in which the law is enforced in a way that is consistent with our values? Why can't we do that? Why can't we agree that women shouldn't need to be on their deathbed to get medical care, to have an abortion, if it's medically necessary? Why can't we just agree that women's health is a priority everywhere in this country? It doesn't matter what state you're in. There's so many stories in the last year or so in this country about women who have died in states that have enacted abortion bans because the medical providers are afraid to break the law, that they are breaking the law by treating them, and they die. So one of my traits is that I want to understand the perspective of the other side. This is having no preferences. Just to understand. listening deeply to people I disagree with. And I understand some of their position. There's economic hardship in this country. Both political parties have let people down. People are deeply cynical, for good reason. And it's an environment that's very ripe for exploitation. Many people, I would say most people, don't have the time or maybe even the ability to dig into the details of the soundbite that they're hearing. The Great Way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. So this text describes a mind that is unattached, at peace, open, boundless. And it can be hard to see this when we're caught up in our lives in the relative world. But you may have experienced it in your zazen practice. And when we touch the ineffable, even just for a moment in our practice, it changes us. It helps us realize our fundamental connection with all things. The easier it is to be present in our lives, the easier it is to bring peace and equanimity to even the most difficult of circumstances. One of the ways that we practice in the Zen school is called shikantaza, just sitting. When a thought arises, we notice it, and we let it go. Dogen Zenji called it dropping body and mind. Now, to practice shikantaza, we need to have developed a certain stability in our practice. This is why we first learn to count our breath or to follow our breath. And I still practice following my breath. And I discovered actually that I was sitting shikantaza almost by accident during sesshin practice. I had forgotten about my koan. I was just sitting there, and I realized this is shikantaza. Oh, I'm practicing shikantaza. So you may eventually find that you're practicing shikantaza. And I mentioned this just so that you can notice it, and then let it go. Sitting many periods over the course of a day, the mind settles, stops fighting so much. It may take time to get to this point, but we discover the samadhi that is always there, just below the churning surface of our thoughts. And what's left is a sense of peace. We aren't thinking about our life, we're just present in this ordinary, mundane, miraculous moment, moment after moment. We drop all of our stories and practice being present. No judgment of ourselves or others. Everything is just as it is. We may even be sick or dying, which we all are, and we're present with that. What do we have faith in? It's the Faith in Mind Sutra. That's the translation I prefer, to have faith in mind. Faith in our mind as part of the universal mind. There's a lovely talk by Enkyo Roshi actually on our website, and she says, I will quote, "To live in this faith is the road to non-duality, because the non-dual is one with the trusting mind." And what is the mind trusting in? Yourself, your experience. The faith mind verse is not about believing in the Dharma or believing in the Buddha and becoming a soldier of the Buddha. Faith mind is to live in this realization, is to be without anxiety about non-perfection, about our own non-perfection and the non-perfection of the world. The second line from the verse, when love and hate are both absent, everything becomes clear and undisguised. Now, this is an interesting line. Our conventional way of thinking is that we want to get rid of hate, but why would we want to get rid of love? Well, we might want to get rid of love when love turns into a kind of attachment, kind of possessiveness, when there are expectations, when there's jealousy. In our society, we all know or have heard about spousal abuse. And it seems that in many cases there is love there, but that love is only a hair's breadth away from hate. So if we can imagine a love that is completely free of possessiveness or agenda, we might call it goodwill. Love and hate are both absent. Everything is clear and undisguised. One of the words in the original Japanese is a word for clarify, or zazen in Japanese. And it refers either to the sound of water that comes from a deep place, or to come out of a hole into a wide, clear space. So this imagery really resonates with me. To be in a wide, clear space, everything is clear and undisguised. Faith in the universal mind without discrimination. Now you might say, yeah, well, sure. I live in this world. How can I have a mind without discrimination? How can I be present and at peace with the world the way it is? Well, you can't. This is the meaning of the Bodhisattva path. All of us, whether we're just beginning or have practiced for many years, are bodhisattvas. If that sounds too generous, perhaps we can say that our work, our practice, is to nurture the bodhisattva in us, to nurture our Buddha nature, so that we can be in the world with all of the moral stress that that entails, bear witness to it, and offer loving action to ourselves and others. Now, of course, we could go off to a mountain and meditate there, like one of the mendicant monks of old. And that's a worthy pursuit as well. The earliest disciples of the Buddha were called home leavers. The goal of practice was the arhat, a practitioner who had stemmed all mental outflows. But I suspect that all of us sitting here this morning are not home leavers. We aren't mendicant monks. We are living in the world, doing our best to live up to our bodhisattva potential by bringing our practice out into the world. By listening to those we disagree with an open heart, to find out that deep longing that exists in their heart that we can empathize with. I was chatting with a friend the other day who also aspires to have difficult conversations with people that she disagrees with. And she said two things that I thought made very great sense to me. One was that you can't do it with everybody because not everyone is able to meet you in that place where you can disagree without getting angry. And the second thing she said was really very, very wise. And she said, if there's even the slightest bit of judgment in your mind, you will communicate that. So you need to drop it, to have that conversation with an open heart. This is our work. Living in the world, we take bodhisattva action according to our situation. We find ways to serve. And the number of ways we can serve is unlimited. Depends very much on the bodhisattva. We can make a phone call to talk with a friend. We can offer a smile or a kind word to a cashier. We can arrange flowers for our altars in the Zendo, as some of you may be doing this afternoon, or our altars at home. We can take public transportation or consider driving an electric vehicle. We can join a phone bank to support the candidate of our choice. We can talk about issues in a way that creates psychological safety for everybody in the room. Faith in mind, trusting in our mind. So the other scripture that I was thinking about is, it's actually the same thing, it's saying the same thing. A young monk named Joshu, he wasn't called Joshu yet, but he would be called Joshu later in his life, asked Nansen, "What is the way?" Nansen answered, "Ordinary mind is the way." So Muman offers a poem to go with this koan, and I will offer it to you now. Hundreds of flowers in spring, the moon in autumn, a cool breeze in summer, and snow in winter. If there is no vain cloud in your mind, for you, it is a good season. Thank you.